Good evening and welcome back to ParaGhoul Paranormal Discoveries from the Dark. If you're new here, this radio show and podcast dives deep into the shadows of Saskatchewan's past to learn what lies within. Sometimes we even go to other locations across Canada to chat about dark history, mysteries, urban legends, and sometimes even monsters. I'm your host, K.D. Kulpa. I'm a horror author and paranormal researcher in Regina, Saskatchewan. I love digging into the past to bring life to ghosts and monsters hiding in the dark. And I especially love going live with you every week to tell you what I've uncovered. Tonight, we're back to talking about Canadian legends and monsters. So we'll be traveling to Prince Edward Island again. In the previous episode where we talked about Prince Edward Island, we debunked the claim that a coffin had shown up on the beaches, but this time we're going to look at a ghost ship. So this ghost ship is said to travel up the Northumberland Strait. So grab a blanket, turn down the lights, and let's dive into the legend that is claimed to be over 200 years old. Now, this legend is actually another fun one, if I'm being honest. And whether it's true or not, I can honestly say that researching it has added yet another Canadian haunted location to my bucket list of places I plan to travel as soon as possible. In case you aren't aware, the Northumberland Strait is a body of water that runs north of Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, separating Prince Edward Island from the Canadian landmass. Now, according to the internet, it varies in depth between 17 and 65 meters. And apparently, given the size and position of this strait, it does have a little unusual tidal patterns. I'm not sure if this could be important to the legend or not, but I just found it interesting that the tides are a little different there because of the shape. And apparently, the strait is also considered to experience some of Canada's warmest ocean water temperatures. So even without the ghost story, this area sounds like a beautiful place to visit. The coasts along the strait are said to have beautiful sandy beaches, which would be pretty enjoyable considering the water can get as high as 25 degrees Celsius in the summer. However, in the winter time, ice covers the water. So I don't know if the ghost ship is able to come in the winter since, it supposedly travels along the strait, but apparently there's ice on it, so I guess we'll find out. If you've ever been to Prince Edward Island and crossed the Confederation Bridge, then you would have been passing over the Northumberland Strait, so you would know what we're talking about here tonight. This bridge is located at the narrowest part of the strait and is said to be roughly 13 kilometers across. So because of this makes it Canada's longest bridge, and it's actually also considered the world's longest bridge over ice-covered water. So in the wintertime when ice is covering it, it is considered the world's largest or longest bridge that covers icy waters. Okay, let's talk about the actual, legend, ghost story, whatever you want to call it. What have people been experiencing along this strait that makes its location a popular tourist destination, not only for its beaches, but also for its ghosts? What I loved about doing research into this ghost story is that even though it's been covered, even though it's like fairly popular and fairly wide known, it's actually even made it into the Saskatoon Star Phoenix a few times, which was pretty cool. A lot of those Eastern Canada ghost stories don't usually make it into our local papers, so I found it interesting that this one did. And I actually found 2 articles in the historical archives where Saskatoon journalists wanted to share the Eastern Canadian experiences. So the first one I found is from April 28th, 1938. The Saskatoon Star Phoenix references multiple articles talking about this particular instance. And this first section is said to come from the Halifax Chronicle. So I'll read you a small portion from the article. It is a sea story in the best traditions of that school of narrative that comes from Prince Edward Island. The story tells how watchers saw a large steamer appear at night in the ice-strewn Northumberland Strait. It appeared to be a passenger vessel, with the strait afloat with ice. Its appearance was unusual. The vessel remained in sight from shortly after dusk until 10 o'clock, so the story goes, without making a sound. No propellers turned, no machinery sent any sound across the water. The phantom ship might have been a deserted hulk, but for the lights that shone brightly from her portholes and above decks. Some observers say they saw persons moving about on deck. Then, at 10 o'clock, to the horror of the watchers, the vessel slowly sank silently into the depths of Northumberland Strait. So I guess, now we know the ghost ship doesn't care if it's wintertime and the water is covered in ice. It will come regardless if it wants to. Now, this particular article goes on to reference another newspaper, the Moncton Transcript, which seems to go into more detail about the experience, or at least into what they think actually happened. It mentioned that the people who saw the ship were standing on Canoe Cove in Prince Edward Island, which is where they could see the ship moving by. And then the article goes on to speculate how these stories seem to come up right before looming storms. So making the authors of that particular article think that perhaps it was like a mirage or some sort of weather phenomenon. But it's hard to say. They also add in that sometimes the ship is thought to be on fire before it sinks. So the fire kind of part of the story is key in this next article that I found in the Star Phoenix, which actually comes 15 years later. So a whole 15 years have passed, and now we're back to the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait in the Saskatoon Star Phoenix. So on December 7th, 1953, the Star Phoenix quotes a story from Cape John, Nova Scotia. So the headline this time states, "Fiery phantom vessel again rides the seas." So here's a short clip from the article. "The phantom ship of the Northumberland Strait is sailing the seas again. Her slender masts spouting fire and ablaze from stem to stern. The old three-master has been reported sighted from this village twice within 1 week. Mrs. Alden Langwell looked out her window one night when the strait between the mainland and Prince Edward Island was wind-scuffed and choppy. She said she saw the phantom ship sliding up the strait, fire streaking from her rigging and hull. Her neighbors watched the ship for an hour. 2 days later, just after supper, nearly all the residents watched the blazing vessel that has been sighted as long as dwellers along this coast can remember. It has to be seen to be believed, the villagers claim." Apparently, this ghost ship has been showing up for years. According to this article, there are 2 possible explanations for its appearance. Some claim the boat is the phantom of a pleasure ship destroyed by a fire. The story goes that there was, a lot of drinking happening on the ship, and suddenly a large fight broke out, underneath within the ship, and it started a fire, and then that caused the ship to sink. Another claim goes that it's the phantom ship of a Scottish immigrant ship which had set sail for Nova Scotia back in the 18th century and was never heard from again. And while I was looking through articles about this particular ghost story, I did come across a couple other claims of, where this or who this ghost ship could be. So another one really likes kind of the pirate kind of version of the story, which is a claim that a man going by, I should say, Captain Kidd, was unjustly executed for piracy in 1701. So it is believed that he now captains the ghost ship that goes down Northumberland Strait. So there you go. If you like pirates, there's a little story for you. A different claim is that it could be the ghost ship of a boat that was supposed to land in Quebec, only to be taken off course by a storm, which then got the boat hit by lightning, which caused it to burst into flames and go down with all on board being lost to sea. So as you can tell, there's a few different ships that have been lost, where lives have been lost, that they're thinking it could be that ship. So it all just kind of goes depending on what you believe, I suppose. In a more recent article I found by the Lewiston Journal, the author did go a little bit deeper into kind of the history and the stories, offering even more details that could help explain the phantom ship, maybe. This article starts off with mentioning that Prince Edward Island was originally part of the traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq, so the indigenous people native to the Atlantic provinces of Canada. Now, when I did a little bit more research into this particular indigenous group, I found that there has been evidence collected that actually there was land in between, so the strait wasn't always underwater. They believe that there was a section of it that was land connecting what is now known as Prince Edward Island to the mainland of Canada, and that allowed indigenous populations to cross over for as long as 10,000 years ago. So they have found evidence of people settling in the area as long as 10,000 years ago. And then the Mi'kmaq ancestors, they believe, have inhabited the area for at least 2,000 years. So it has been a well-used island for quite a long time. Now, in 1534, a French explorer, Jacques Cartier, is said to have discovered, quote unquote, the land, leading to it being colonized by the French as part of the colony of Acadia. However, the French didn't end up actually settling on the island until the 1720s. And after, the 7 Years' War ended in 1763, it then was switched to being a British colony, and its name finally changed to Prince Edward Island in 1799, or kind of around there. But so there's some history about the land. Again, that doesn't really explain the ghost ship, but it gives you a little bit of history of the area. Now, here is what the article then goes on to say about the phantom ship specifically. So, I'll read you a section from it again. So, each area of Prince Edward Island abounds with tales, and Prince County to the west seems to have more than its share, particularly the western shore. This sometimes lonely stretch of coast is edged by an almost continuous line of red sandstone cliffs, broken here and there by shallow inlets around which tiny fishing villages cluster. Over the centuries, the water of Northumberland Strait have carved jagged lines and rock formations out of the soft cliff face, giving the area a stark beauty that carries with it a certain air of mystery. From this western shore comes the majority of reported sightings of the island's most curious, unexplained phenomenon, the phantom ship of Northumberland Strait. She was first sighted off Sea Cow Head, around the northwestern tip of the island, during a stormy night in 1786. From the Sea Cow Head lighthouse, the keeper and others watched helplessly as a sturdy little schooner was swept by the waves in a treacherous course straight toward the cliffs. As the vessel drew closer to the shore, it became apparent that she was without a crew. Yet, just as she was about to crash into the rocks, the schooner turned around completely and headed out toward sea, where she suddenly disappeared into thin air. Since then, the phantom ship has reappeared at intervals of about 10 years, primarily during September, October, and November, usually before a northeast wind. Sometimes described as a clearly outlined, full-rigged ship aflame, other times as a fiery form in the shape of a half moon, the apparition has been witnessed by hundreds of people over the years, both islanders and residents of mainland areas opposite the island shore. All attempts to catch up with her have been in vain, for she seems to slip beneath the waves as pursuers draw near. So, according to Charmaine, which is the author of this particular article, researchers have tried to provide the scientific explanation for this phantom ship, which isn't surprising because, there's always skeptics trying to explain away what's actually happening. So I thought we'd kind of talk about that next. Although I did find it interesting that there are different kind of descriptions of the ship. Sometimes it's on fire, sometimes it's simply looking like a crescent moon, sometimes it looks like a little schooner that is, unmanned and has nobody on it. So it really just kind of depends on the person, I guess. So it makes it hard to understand how scientists can explain this particular mystery because it does have so many different potential descriptions. But let's kind of talk about it a little bit so that you can kind of get what you think it actually is. So, okay, according to the experts, or the skeptics, if you prefer that term, some suggest that this phenomenon of a burning phantom ship may be caused by electricity. At least that's what a scientist from New Brunswick named William Francis Ganong, I don't know if I said that right, proposed as an explanation back in 1905. So like I said, this has been a long ghost story, so they've been trying to explain it for quite a while now. Now, William suggested that people were actually seeing the phenomenon known as St. Elmo's fire, which is a weather phenomenon that causes bright, glowing balls of light on pointed objects, which would be similar to, a mass of a ship. So this electrical field can be created by thunderstorms or during severe weather, where there is an electric charge in the air. However, it has been stated that this phenomenon is actually fairly rare and is better seen from an aircraft than from the ground. Not to mention, this doesn't really explain how the ship is seen and then tends to either sink without a noise or simply disappear. So it would explain it if a real ship was going down the strait and it appeared that it was on fire, but it doesn't explain how this ghost ship got there in the first place, right? So I don't know about this one. Okay, another claim is that it is simply a mirage created by a band of warm air settling on a band of cold air, which could occur if the weather is just right. And, since we're kind of off of the ocean, in seas or ocean or whatever, the water, lots of body of water, you do tend to have these different contrasting pockets of air, right? So that could be a potential cause, maybe. This is the same explanation apparently given for another famous ghost ship, if you've heard of it, the Flying Dutchman. Apparently that is the explanation given for why people see the Flying Dutchman, is this band of warm air settling on a band of cold air causing this mirage. Now, finally, the last explanation that I could find is simply that it's caused by rolling fog. That, this fog comes in on the water, playing tricks on people's minds, making them think that they see a ship coming toward them or going by, and then simply disappearing because the fog shifts or whatever. Although, again, this doesn't exactly explain the experiences of seeing a flaming ship that some claim to see, or if you believe the first account that was listed in the Star Phoenix back in the 1930s that we talked about a little bit earlier. That one, if you remember, the claim was that they could actually see people walking on the ship and that you could see the lights in the windows. So fog, I don't think would really explain that one. But regardless of the cause or the scientific explanation, it has been said that the ship has been seen by hundreds, and it might even be into the thousands of people by now. I'm not sure, because a lot of these articles came from late 1900s, into the early 2000s. So, and according to all of the articles I've read that are more recent, the last time the ship has been claimed to be seen was in 2008. Apparently back then, a 17-year-old claimed to have seen it go by, and at the time he said it looked bright white and gold, that it was shiny. So supposedly, from what I could tell anyway, there hasn't been any documented experiences or sightings of the ship since 2008, which is interesting because, nowadays cell phones and cameras are more common, so why would the ghost ship suddenly disappear? I don't know. Anyway, what do you think? Do you believe that there truly is a ghost ship of Northumberland Strait? Or are you, kind of with the scientists on this one, that it's probably just a phenomenon created by unpredictable weather or, fog rolling in? I don't know. Personally, this story just put Prince Edward Island on my list of places I have to visit sometime between September and December one of these years. I wonder if someone in the West would let me live there for like 6 weeks to watch for a ghost ship. I don't know. Set up cameras. It would be an interesting trip. And I mean, realistically, you're along some beautiful beaches, and I've heard great things about Prince Edward Island, and I could go visit, Anne of Green Gables? I could go visit that while I'm there. So it could be a fun trip regardless. Whether you believe it's really a ghost ship or you favor the explanations given by the skeptics, I hope you enjoyed hearing about the phantom ship that even had its own stamp at one point in Canadian history. Like that's how big this story has gotten, is that we have put it on a stamp so that we can remember the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait. I love that. I love that we do that stuff like that. Anyway, thank you for joining us tonight. Did you know I have a weekly newsletter that includes a link to the latest episode of ParaGhoul Paranormal? And subscribers also receive updates about upcoming events, behind the scenes information, and subscriber only updates on my upcoming book releases, book signings, and more. If you're interested in joining that newsletter, then make sure you head over to my website at kdkulpa.com to sign up. And speaking of, I'm very excited to kind of let you in on a little secret. My latest book, which will be available very shortly, is going to be coming out, and it is called Unearthed. Unearthed is my sci-fi horror novella, so it's a shorter book for those of you that are unfamiliar with novel versus novella. It's a little bit shorter than my usual books, and it will be released this month. So if you like movies that are kind of like Aliens, the Alien franchise, or the Predator franchise, or even if you liked the Doctor Who episode that was about the Weeping Angels. If you don't know the Weeping Angels, it's stone statues that can come to life when they aren't being observed, then you'll definitely want to check out my new book. I kind of tried to combine these ideas into a new book idea that follows kind of the sci-fi horror genre. So I'm really excited about this release, and I'm hoping to eventually turn it into a series. We'll see if that happens. But make sure that you do check it out and let me know what you think. Again, there will be information on my website as soon as it is released, so you can always go and check it out there. Members of the ParaGhoul Guild will of course get information about it first before I release it to anyone else, since they get behind the scenes information and extra content every month. So if you want to learn more about becoming a KDK Ghoul Guild member, make sure you visit my website. Now, next week, we will be back into the local Saskatchewan haunts episodes. In fact, I think this will be the last local Saskatchewan haunts episode of season 1, if you can believe it. I can't believe that season 1 is ending. But yes, we are going to be doing our final local Saskatchewan haunts episode about a more famously known haunted location that unfortunately is no longer available to visit, and that is the Fort San Sanatorium. I'll dive into the history behind the building, some of the stories that I've heard from people who were able to enter the building before it was torn down, and why, finding a way to tour the land is still on my bucket list. So if you know whoever the owner is, and if they would let me check it out. I know I have to be careful because it used to have a building there and it got torn down, but I would just love to go just stand even on the street that was in front of the building and just see what it feels like. Because, you kind of wonder, these haunted buildings, once the building is no longer there, what happens to the ghosts? I would love to do an investigation or set up some cameras and some equipment and just see if we capture anything sitting on the street in front of the building. Unfortunately, it is now fenced off, so I respect the owner that has fenced it off, highly. But again, if you know the owner, let me know. I would love to get on that site. Okay, stay tuned for our upcoming episodes, where we'll uncover more secrets, unravel more mysteries, and delve deeper into the shadows. Until then, remember to keep your flashlight handy and digital recorders ready. This is Katie Kulpa, signing off. Until next time, my ghouls,